It's Sunday, October 20th, 2019. This is All About Your Benjamins. Welcome to your weekly mixtape and weekend review. We're going to be real quick this week. I want to first off apologize for being a little late getting this out. We had soccer games all weekend, had early ones this morning, so getting it out a little bit later, but that's all right. Only a few headlines to get through, so let's get to the headlines that may or may not be impacting your financial plan and portfolio. The first, the IMF has been getting together talking about the 2019 global economy, the 2020. 2019 has been a little bit slower than expected, but the expectation for 2020 is actually positive, but the big glaring thing everybody is focusing on is the US-China trade war. So this has already been something we've talked about a lot. We don't need to go in a lot of headlines, but just to reiterate the fact that this is a big deal and it is impacting the global economy, not just ours and China's. So it's something that all of the leaders around the world are looking at, and if it gets resolved, that sets up things to be positive for next year. But if it lingers on or gets worse, then officials are worried about what that might mean to the global economy and seeing it spill over and continuing to have the economy on the global front slowly grow, or maybe even slow down and not grow at all. So we'll see, but the IMF leaders are talking about that. Next up, we've been monitoring some economic data at a very high level for us because we're not economists, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But we talked about retail sales over the last couple of years in the consumer, or last couple of months in the consumer. In September, the U.S. consumer spent less money than they did the previous month. Now, if you read the article, they talk about the big drop in spending being on automobiles, so I don't know how much of an impact that really says to what the consumer's doing. My initial thought was a lot of money is typically spent in July and August getting ready for school, so if we're minding our budgets and we spend a lot more than we usually spend in previous months, maybe cut back in the month of September, or just getting back into the routine of school might impact what's being spent as well. I don't know any more than anybody else. That was my initial thought, but it's something worth looking at. The beauty in all of this is, as long-term investors, basing everything we do off of our financial plans for our lives and for our goals down the road, we don't have to react month to month to what these things might be. But I do think it is good to understand what's going on. If we continue to see that the consumer is spending less, our economy is very heavily driven by what the consumer does, so that could lead to the slowdown that we've talked about before and potential recession that will be coming one day. So don't need to be really acting upon this, just understanding. And I think when you understand what's going on and why things are happening, that makes you more likely to stick with your plan and stick to your strategy. So the more we know, the more we understand, I think the better we are as investors and people. That's why I go over these things. The Fed, we've talked about them a lot. That's next up on my list of things to talk about. You know, the Fed's going to be meeting in the next couple of weeks with the plan and the expectation of cutting rates one more time and then potentially pausing. And that's what this headline is talking about, is that the Fed will most likely be cutting rates, but then may take a wait and see action on the other ones, or maybe even pause at the meeting beyond then. We'll have to wait and see, but that talk is already coming, so just be prepared for these headlines and sub-headlines that come from what the Fed may or may not do, or may or may not say, as we've talked about in the past. Going back to international markets, Brexit was a big deal a couple of years ago. Every so often it comes up in the news and we talk about it again. It has not been finished, and as we find out now, the British government is asking the UK to give a little bit more time before a final Brexit decision is made. So this is not what Prime Minister Johnson wants. It goes against what his plan is, but the British government asked for more time before anything is done. So this will maintain a headline. It is a headline risk, I would say, whenever there's a decision one way or another. If you remember when the Brexit vote occurred, the market sold off, and then ever since then things have recovered, and we're still waiting for this to go down. So just again, another thing to be aware of as international global investors. We need to know what the headlines are over there and what's going on, again, to better understand and stick to our plan. And the final, I told you this was going to be a quick one, the final article is not really a headline that is impacting planning, but as far as what happens to investments, but it does affect planning from the standpoint of debt. So there's an article that talks about how interest rates on credit cards are actually going to be going up even though interest rates are going down. And the reason for that is many people are using the rewards to their advantage. They're handling their credit cards responsibly, paying it off each month, racking up these rewards. I personally try to do that as well, to get free flights or wherever it might be, cash back. And those are very expensive programs to the credit card companies. And the way that they are able to pay for that is by driving the interest rates up on those who do not pay their balances off. So if you do not pay your balance off, first off, try to make that a habit, and now you have even more incentive to do so, because your interest rate, your minimum payment, the amount that you're going to pay over time is going to start going up because of interest rates going up on your credit cards, not because of your behavior. So just be mindful of that. If you're using credit cards appropriately, paying them off every month, then you don't have much to worry about. It's not going to impact you. But if you are carrying balances, you're going to see the interest rate most likely going up to pay for those who are using credit cards properly and the benefits they're getting. So use that as motivation to get things cleaned up. If you can do some 0% balance transfers to surf this balance that you have and pay it off quicker with no interest, that's a good thing to think about as well. But the main thing is, don't carry those balances, and now you have even more incentive to pay those off each month going forward. That's it for this week's mixtape. Be sure to check the article or the blog post down below. A lot of great posts this week from a lot of great writers out there. I know they end up being a lot of the same names, but they do such a good job, I can't not put them on. But I'm always looking for new posts and new authors to include on the mixtape. So if you have a favorite one, send it to me out on Twitter, send me a DM, or let me know who it is, and I'll make sure to be following them as well and sprinkle them also. So with that, I'll let you get to your weekend. Again, I apologize for being a little bit later, but soccer duties came this morning, so here we are. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.